Welcome to the Future's Sanctuary. Come, gather around the fire. We share heart space, community. The night sky sings starlight. Our hearts beat in unison. The earth sleeps, breathing low. The sanctuary of the future holds us, nurturing what can be if we outlove the pain. Holding us in reverent hands. We are many, we are one. That is the magic of dreams. Welcome.
Hi there, I'm with Dr. Dana Klisanin, and I'm really happy because we've been trying to contact one another, connect for a little while now, and I'm been trying to do that because Dana's working on this rewilding lab stuff. She's done a TED talk on it. Dana is a psychologist and futurist, been in the game for how long, Dana?
Oh, about 20 years now.
About 20 years, yes. Because I've known Dana's name for ages, but because she's on the other side of the planet, we often don't get to talk very much, but we have had a couple of nice chats along the way, because this rewilding stuff is really important. And I would like to ask Dana about your story, about where you are in the world. You're in California somewhere, I think, right?
No, I'm in Arkansas.
Arkansas, okay. Where the hell is Arkansas? I don't know. I don't know what part of the states that is. I thought,
okay. We're near Texas and
yeah.
Louisiana, like
Okay.
Tennessee. Sort of central but lower.
I can see it. I can see it now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So take a deep breath and slow down. I get excited. This is the first one for our Future Sanctuary, our first talk, you see. So I'm a bit excited, a bit hyped, and I'm happy to have Dana here. So Dana, rewilding. Why rewilding? How did you get there? Can you give us a little bit of a synopsis, please?
I sure can, and I'm equally excited to be on this chat with you. And hello to anybody who's listening to this. I hope one day maybe I'll meet you in person. But I am glad we have this technology to be able to connect. But yeah, rewilding. How did I come to rewilding? And it is it really came. Why did I decide on the term or the nomenclature rewilding? Why did I decide to use that? And I'm going to start there because a lot of what I'm going to talk about is things that other people do talk about with other words. So I want to just sort of be clear to say I'm not saying that I've invented anything, discovered anything new, or rewilding is just a frame for things that already exist. And the reason that I thought it was an interesting frame, or that I decided I wanted to use it, is because I thought, in the term is really used in ecology, and it's used to restore habitats that have been denatured. I'm sure many of our listeners already know that. One of the more well-known examples here in the United States, and I'm sure you have many over there in Australia, of ecologists rewilding denatured areas. Here, the return of the wolf to Yellowstone was a very important kind of moment when that keystone species really changed the park, and basically, the deer changed their grazing patterns, which allowed seedlings to come up. And in general, I mean, some people say it even changed the course of the river ultimately. Now, I'm not making that claim, but the reason that I think that's an important metaphor to apply over to psychology and ultimately futures is because I think that that's sort of where we are, like in our psychic domain, and that's underlies everything, right? I mean, it underlies how we approach futures. It underlies how we actually approach medicine, or any field really, is where is our head at? What do we think is possible? And I think that So many people are suffering with burnout and all of these illnesses and challenges, and even just something as simple as the inability to maybe be creative. That a lot of people don't feel creative. And I think rewilding works because it's about what do we need to bring back to this denatured space. So if we think of our psyche as a denatured space, the same way that we would have thought of a landscape as denatured, right? Ecologists know what to bring back to that landscape. And so what I'm interested in is what do we need to bring back to our landscape to flourish.
Yeah.
So that's why I like that word. I think it just sort of puts everything into kind of a perspective.
That's a beautiful description, and it really sits well with what we're trying to do with the future sanctuary, is that there is a sanctuary, but most of us have left the door wide open and it's just been denatured, and that therefore something needs to happen, and the wild, we need to let our own wild out. It's been
Yeah.
caged. So to me, that's a beautiful way of describing what drew you to the rewilding process. And of course, it is a term that's used a lot in multiple fields now.
Yeah.
So it's a term that's getting traction. And I think there's something interesting about the way words do emerge into common use, I guess. But
Hmm.
of course, with all things, words are slippery. So we have to
Yes.
be very clear about what does it mean in your context to rewild, and how do you craft a pathway there? Because you've established a rewilding lab, right?
Yes.
And that's interesting because I've been involved with labs and I've actually written about them, because the lab is an interesting metaphor for making sense of things. It's also got a very strong modernist association with science, and the production of certain kinds of tools and elements, but also knowledge. So the rewilding lab is, I really like it, and I notice it's in your email address, isn't it? You've actually,
Yes.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about the lab, please.
Okay. Well, when I decided that I was really interested in this work and I really wanted to move away from some of the prior work that I had been doing, which, if anybody's interested, just for the sake of balance, for most of my career, in fact, I worked in looking at how could we advance planetary consciousness through digital technologies.
Mm,
So media and things like that. And so I think maybe one reason that I even ended up becoming more interested in rewilding was because of my own, um, let's just say, lack of time spent in and with the natural world. I was always working on how can we protect it? How can we help other people decide to act to protect it? And however, I myself was not spending enough time with nature. And so when I did, take some time for myself and realize that in fact that was so powerful, and also the creative piece, um, which I know you do at the sanctuary with poetry and things like that. The combination of these together became so interesting to me, and I thought, well, that's what I want to move all of my work into. And when I
mm,
made that decision, I decided, well, I'll create a lab, a center, a place where this work could live. Um, Both theoretically kind of house it and then also experientially, so where I could bring people together to maybe do some of the things that you're doing with the sanctuary.
mm. Yeah, yeah, okay. And so, what kind of people come? How do you get people to come and play in a rewilding lab? Because
Lab.
that's a critical question for all of us doing stuff on, I'd say, on the edge of dominant or mainstream type work.
Well, fortunately, I will have to say, I mean, so far, because it is a new lab, I mean, essentially, this is the second year, the beginning of the second year. So really, the physical space
Yeah.
has only been there for 1 year, and prior to that, it was just an online theoretical,
Yeah.
think tank place.
That's when we
And
talked first. Yeah.
yes, and then during this last year, we held a few workshops, and the way that the word got out about those actually was I was invited to speak at an organization called Creative Mornings. Have you heard of Creative Mornings?
Nice
Oh,
name. Morning as in waking up in the
yeah,
morning, or
yes.
morning as in tragic.
No, no, no. Morning as in waking up in the morning.
Cool. Okay.
It's something that if you guys don't have it there, someone would probably be
I'll,
interested to start it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, briefly, it's an international organization that different people in any town or city can register, and then they bring speakers to speak on the first Friday of the month in the morning, like early, 7 a.m., so that people who want to come can still go to work.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it, or one of the interesting things about it, is that as an organization, they choose a topic, one topic, and then everybody around the world speaks on that topic, but they
Cool.
speak from their perspective. They can
Yeah.
speak about anything as long as it circles back to that topic.
Yeah.
So I was invited to speak, and I spoke on the topic that was given to me, which was parallels. And I made the parallel between the loss of the natural world and rising rates of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so after I gave that speech, it sort of helped the community to get to know a little bit about my work.
Yeah.
And I think that that led to, some people deciding to sign up for some workshops
Mm.
and so that was sort of a catalyst.
That's great. Yeah, I'll definitely go looking for Creative Mornings. I like the title. I'm part of Death Cafes, for instance, which are possibly similar. They're a global sort of awareness, and we talk about matters relating to end of life and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've read about the death cafes. I haven't participated, but
yeah.
I thought I would probably enjoy that.
Very interesting and really open spaces. That's kind of like an open space technology in a sense, that sort of process. I don't know if you know open space, but I've used it a lot in over the years.
Yes.
So let's say okay, so we've seen that you're doing this, and a friend tells me that there's a workshop coming up in your lab, and I think, yes, that sounds like for me. So I'm walking in the door. What's going to happen? How does it sort of unfold for somebody walking in, Gun?
Okay. Well, it depends on what the workshop is, but just to give you a general sense of, let's say, one that, a model that I've used, because where my office is located is just a very short walk from a park that has a hiking area called the Ramble. So what I did, on one of the workshops was I had everyone gather, gave everyone some paper, like a small notebook,
Yep.
and then we walked to the Ramble. And then
Yeah.
once we got there, we sat down on the rocks beside the water, the stream, I guess one would say. And I led them in some sensory to get started, just the different senses, what do you hear? And then I was quiet for, 5 minutes. And then I asked them to write about that. And then I would move on to focus, your attention on
Hmm.
one object and keep looking at it for 5 minutes. And, the same thing throughout
Yeah.
all of the senses. And so that's one approach that's very sensory embodied approach and creative,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's creative writing um, mixed with meditation and just being present
Yeah.
moment awareness.
Fantastic.
And
And
then, well, let me
yeah,
just
I
say,
was going to say,
yeah,
and what
yeah.
happens then?
Well, and then what happened, really, I mean, that's the bulk of it, but what happens then is we walk back and form a circle and share our experiences. so that we have the community, the feeling of community. And, if you want to speak, you
Mhm.
can. If you don't want to speak, you don't have to, no pressure. Um, and, that was, let's just say, the very basic, um, a very basic workshop would involve those aspects.
Yeah.
And, then it can branch out from there. There could be, any other type of prompts for imagination. Because my background psychology, I'm
Mhm.
really archetypally inclined. So I'm very interested in depth work, and bringing those together. And then, I love drumming circles and things like
Great.
that as well. My lab doesn't really allow for, let's say, large groups, or let's say dance parties and things,
Yeah.
because it's a small office. But I'd love to, do those in the future if I, had a space and the interest.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting because when you start talking drumming, one of the things we talk about in the Future Sanctuary is the importance of ritual,
Hmm.
ritualizing space. Can
Yes.
be inner space, of course, because that's where it all starts, and then outer space. And the drumming work is a really important, I think, element to generating that because it's so primal. Rhythm is so primal because it's sensory too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Some of my best experiences have been through drumming.
Yeah, yeah, I can get that. So we have a colleague here in Oceania. She's over in New Zealand, Dr. Cheryl Doyd, and she's running a project called Measuring the Immeasurable. So how do
Okay.
you? So there's, we live in a world which loves quantification. We love to sort of how many sort of people didn't suicide because you took them into the ramblings and and that sort of stuff. Of course, that's not what I'm into really, but I'm into advocating for impact. So I'm really in alignment with what Cheryl's doing in that work that she's doing. But it's about how do we keep the momentum through the impact on the soul or the mind or the psyche, if you want to use a psychology, of another human being or of a collective, of a community. Can you offer any thoughts on that? Because it's something that I've been thinking about quite a lot. Is the role that impact plays, of course, in universities and all that sort of stuff. And so I want to take the word on a different tangent, just like you took rewilding and you've given it your own direction. I think because
Mhm.
impact is important, but I don't think we actually understand half the time what it might mean, especially in very subtle spaces.
No, I think you're, yeah, really speaking about something that's very important, and particularly because, and so much of the ability to engage in these activities, whether they're, a community workshop, or whether it's a workshop that is research based. So,
Yeah,
in other words, the ability to conduct research is always going to somewhat be based on the ability to get funding.
yeah,
And if you have a way to measure the impact that your work is having, then you're much more likely, right, to
to
receive
get
funding.
something. Yes, exactly.
So, I mean, one of the areas that I have been very interested in, I mean, own, and I say very interested in, I guess I just feel like I should qualify this by saying, mainly because of this funding piece, is, the neuroscience behind all of these experiences.
Yeah,
Because actually, one way that we can show impact is through, what our brain is doing, and what our hormones are doing. And, so much research now in forest bathing has shown, really proven without a doubt that time in nature is healing for our body, and in a way, mind, body, spirit as a whole, right? The way we
yeah,
think of it.
yeah,
Um, and so I think that impact, that's one way to show impact, is, through using neuroscience as a tool. And
yep,
even if you're not able to conduct research like that yourself, which is becoming easier, by the way, because of, so many wearable devices and bands that we can actually get this feedback from. And that's what I have been investigating, the use of the Muse band, which is, a device that's really originally was used for meditation training.
Really?
Now they use it for sleep studies. Yes, Muse, Muse. I'm sure that there's other brands and companies. That's just the one that I had used early on and was familiar with. And so now one can bring that and take it out into nature. So let's just say you have your workshop participants and you do the exact same thing that I said that we did, right? But this
Mm.
time wear the Muse band,
That's
right?
fantastic.
You get a baseline of where people were and then where they, how that changes, how the brain waves change. And then you have some evidence, that speaks to certain groups,
Yeah.
right? It's quantitative instead of qualitative.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I took a note earlier because you mentioned something that made me remembered another piece of research that I came across. Neuroscience is where I turned when I first started mapping out the anticipatory aesthetics, the concept of anticipatory aesthetics.
Okay.
Because their aesthetic awareness is sensory, but it's also culturally defined, and it has neural, very clear cognitive origins, you might say, almost in terms of evolution and everything. But then I remembered a piece of research from colleagues at Lund University. Lund is in the south of Sweden,
Okay.
and they've been doing some interesting work on what they call, and I think it's more broadly called, biophobia. So biophilia is where you're in love, and we're all supposed to be in love with nature. But there are actually people who are deeply fearful
Right.
of the
Yes.
natural world, a cockroach or a spider or a mosquito, and they're it's an absolute thing because they've been so insulated from nature, and
Yes.
and there is a culture of control, and you can't control nature. So I
Right.
was just thinking, I'm just bringing that up because you triggered the association where people love going and forest bathing. Sure, it's really good for us. It helps you with depression, all sorts of stuff. But what about those people who are biophobic? And I know a couple. I can think of a couple. I'm not going to name them just in case they ever listen to this. But
Yeah. Well, now, that's where we would separate out to, perhaps they might want to seek out clinical psychologists and do some desensitization training, depending on, how deep that phobia goes, right?
mm,
It's no different than, all the other different types of phobia that are, eh, have been listed forever in the
yeah,
literature. um, but yes, I think that, I mean, there could be so many deep levels of why they have those, but certainly what you said, the fact that for a lot of people who live in very busy cities and they don't spend any time in nature,
mm,
they can become, I mean, I know someone also who moved from the UK to Arkansas, and Arkansas is called the natural state. So we have plenty of forests, rivers, streams, that's the big deal here. Anyway, this gentleman moved from the UK and from a busy city, and he has a typical house with a backyard, a lawn, but his backyard backs up to a forest. And
mm,
he was telling me once that, he won't step foot outside of his lawn. He won't step into the forest. So
yeah,
you see, he's a great example. He'll go outside, but he won't go into the wild, the other side of the gate where,
yes.
the forest is.
Over the fence. There's that movie, isn't there? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that, and it's. I mean, it does. It speaks to something else. Michael Pollan, who's you may know his
Yeah.
work. He says
Yeah.
nature hates a garden. And that often comes up in my mind when I meet certain contexts in which we have, let's say, the natural is sitting alongside, and this contestation. And of course, that's part of the biophobic, I think, core, is that there is
Yeah.
a sense that nature is going to mess with everything.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and
true.
but mess is important in futures work. Chaos, uncertainty. How do you tread through those sorts of spaces with people, especially when you're meeting them in your lab, in the rewilding lab?
I think that that touches upon some of the depth work,
Yeah,
because again, once you step into this field, um, well, it's like when you step into a forest, you don't know what you're going to come across. Likewise, when you start to do depth work, whether you're doing that through, writing, expressive
yeah,
writing work, or guided types of work, um, you can come across things that can be frightening, right? You can come across a snake when you step into that forest, and in depth work, you can also come across things in your shadow, right, that you have been not wanting to confront. And so I bring that up to say that's kind of like the unknown. That's
yeah.
what we can't predict, and it's complex. And I what I personally recommend to people is meditation,
Hmm.
because I think
Yeah,
that finding a baseline place of stability is important the deeper that you go into this work, no matter
sure.
which direction you take it.
Yeah. That's interesting. And yeah, I mean, meditation is my go-to for sure.
Yeah.
And the unpredictable, it's to me, there's something about that. And I like to, I would love to explore that with my students in this future sanctuary space, is how do
Yeah.
we handle it? Yesterday, my son came in here and he said, there's a snake in our lounge room. And it was a venomous one. It wasn't a big one, but it got lost. And so we had to sort of get it outside, which we managed to do without dying or anything. But it's that sort of
Yeah.
unexpected, you know.
And we're seeing it, sort of at a heightened degree right now around the world in the political sphere. There is so
Talk about
much,
that. There are a
that
lot
has
of
just been
snakes in the
like,
political sphere. Yeah,
yeah, just, you know, generations of diplomacy just thrown out the window. And that's, yeah, unexpected. Um, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, that's a good place to stop in a sense, to just take a breath and let people have a think about what you've covered in this talk. And, you're open to people contacting you if they want to touch base with you about things. It's
Absolutely.
happened a number of times over the last year or so. People have sent an email or something to one of our speakers. But I really want to thank you, Dana, for giving me the time, or giving us the time. And I need to check. I've always say Dana, but I've heard a lot of Americans say Dana. Am I saying your name
Yeah.
incorrectly?
I do use Dana, but I'll
There
answer
you go.
to
Okay, no,
anything.
I suddenly, I don't know, at some point it went through my head. I thought, that's right. I've heard Americans, because one of my friends in New Zealand is Dana, but
Uh-huh.
whenever she's with Americans, she's Dana. And I suddenly thought, oh, am I saying your name incorrectly? So sorry about that. Yeah, I like to get these little things right.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to answer to anything, but I do go by Dana, and anyone who wants to reach out to me is more than welcome to do so, and I will happily share any resources that I have, for anyone who's interested in this application of, this work. And it's really just an integral approach. I mean, I guess I want to say that. I mean, really, I've tried to weave different strands that I've found, throughout my years, of work together, and package it up, I guess, in a way that I hope that it might help others. And so if anybody's interested to learn more about that, please, yeah, reach out.
Well, you may well have people emailing you, Dana,
All
and I
right.
thank you so much. I'm going to stop there with a thank you.
Thank you.